It's Momo Monday, and for those of you who have not seen a proper Momo Monday yet because you're new, we haven't done a proper Momo Monday in a few weeks. So we start Momo Mondays by taking a few calm, steadying, relaxing breaths. So breathe in. And out. And breathe in. And out. And this Momo Monday is about sort of reflection and sort of a meditation point for the week, something to think about. And this one has something less of a point than they normally do, because I don't know about you guys, my thoughts, thinking have been all over the place lately. Too much to do, pulled too many different directions, really freaking tired. But this concept just wouldn't leave me alone. I kept getting these little nudges all over the place that this is something to talk about, because I'd turn on the TV and there'd be something about it, or I'd read something and there'd be something about it, or just kept encountering it. So if it's front of mind for me, safe bet it's going to be front of mind for someone else. And this may sound a bit strange, like, whoa, who just casually thinks about these concepts? But the concept I'm referring to right now is a concept called tyranny of the majority. The idea that a majority rules democratic system does have weaknesses, even though, it's better than anything else we got. But the idea is that the majority of any group places their interests above and at the expense of those in the minority. And it ends up creating basically oppressive conditions, as though, a form of tyranny on the minority. And I guess I'm still in Passover hangover, the idea of freedom and tyranny and everything very front of mind. But also all this talk about, Fox News and Roger Ailes and Bill O'Reilly and all this focus on sexual harassment, because if you put sexual in anything, it gets, more attention in the press. But I think, the general culture of bullying that seemed to be infecting not just, the stories coming out of Fox News, but workplaces in general, this seems to be an ongoing thing. I know that, Allison Camerata over the weekend was talking about her experiences, and other people have talked about their experiences. And to me, this all seems pretty normal, working for, large media companies. And that, I guess, is what got me thinking about this, because it's one of those things where the system doesn't improve because there aren't enough people who are willing to sort of stand up and take the risk of having an unpopular opinion and suggest that, hey, maybe we should change things for the betterment of everyone before there's a giant disaster. That tends to not be a very popular opinion. And so anybody who's got any sort of visionary or forward thinking just basically watches the train come in slow motion, and they wait for the train to hit and there to be a big disaster, and then all of a sudden stuff starts happening. But then, of course, it's reactive instead of being proactive, because if there's no disaster, nobody gets credit for preventing the disaster. It didn't happen. Whereas, if something bad happens, then, you can come in and clean it up or save it, or, salvage is a better term. Salvage what you can from it. Well, then you're this big hero. And this is a really frustrating part of, actually doing real boots on the ground work for various causes, and not just being a keyboard warrior where you can yell at people on social media. This got me thinking about gaming and how this, tyranny of the majority concept is working. Because the interesting thing about tyranny of the majority, the classic example they have is there's a group of 13 people spread out over 3 rooms, and they're deciding to repaint the rooms. And so they take a vote, and the majority votes for blue. So all the rooms are painted blue. Well, in this particular scenario, all 6 people who wanted the room painted red live in the same room. So a room gets painted blue, even though none of the people that wanted the room painted blue live in that room. That's the sort of textbook, really simple to understand example of tyranny of the majority. On paper, it seems like majority rules are fair. In practice, people got their preferences overridden for really no good reason. Why couldn't you just let each room vote? Tyranny of the majority tends to happen when power isn't localized. And another example of it, that sounds strange that this is part of it, but this is part of the criticism and thought of it, is that you sometimes get these loud but vocal minorities making things miserable for everybody because, think of the children type things. Like, we are thinking of the majority, but really it's not affecting anyone in real terms. Interesting, a complicated concept, but it's definitely being affected in games by all this, inclusion that in practice isn't terribly inclusive. Like, this particular form of inclusion actually alienates the people who actually play games. And this is when you get into the difficult work of figuring out the best solution to a problem. And let me tell you, from experience, you make no friends having to be the person that makes that call. It is not fun. But that is why leaders lead, and leaders are generally the minority of the population. And gaming has this reality that people end up in positions of leadership. They're not really leadership material. They happen to make this awesome game by themselves, and then somebody goes, we want you to make an even more awesome game, so now you have staff. But just because you can make an awesome game doesn't mean you can manage staff. And so people kind of lose their minds and get really weird and start looking for, tiny little pockets of control. So all of a sudden things stop being so overwhelming and start making more sense to their, very task-oriented brains. And that's a unique challenge because gaming is this, combination of the technical and the artistic in a way that very few other things are, like maybe science fiction movie making, but even then that's linear. That's not interactive. It's interactive art, interactive entertainment is a much higher degree of difficulty. And so we get these scenarios where we're almost like the Pied Piper and the Emperor with no clothes at the same time. That anybody with the slightest bit of charisma or dynamism or even aggression can just really get, that right narrative comes along, and all these people who are just looking for a tether go, yes, this is the answer, even though it's absolutely reductive and totally wrong. So I wanted to present this idea so that people could think about it. Because I've been seeing a lot of debates lately that break down on, well, this is the answer, like this is what we're going to do. And then somebody says, well, what about this group that is a minority, is a fairly small minority, but they're people too. Oh, well, they're just freaks. They don't matter. And there are euphemisms for they're just freaks. They don't matter. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. Like, they are freaks. They don't matter. And I think that enthusiast gamers, that core that, I count myself among, we get treated like freaks in our own community now because there's a lot fewer of us than there are, the people who buy a console and buy one, maybe two games a year because they just want to play, Madden and Call of Duty, and that's it. Because games are about choice, we should be the last community where tyranny of the majority has taken hold, and yet I see it all over the place. People love to throw statistics at each other to say, and there's something wrong with every statistic, I mean, this thing about, I don't even remember the numbers anymore because it changes, but this idea that, 52% of game players are women, and you'll see this quoted, and people get this image of women sitting on their couch with an Xbox controller or playing Grand Theft Auto. That's not the type of gamer that statistic was talking about. They're talking about if you have Candy Crush on your phone, you count as a gamer for the purpose of that survey. Those numbers that come out every year come out of a lobby group that are deliberately collecting data to lobby Washington on behalf of the games industry to try to prevent censorship and all this stuff we don't want. And so it's something of a blue lie. It's, a lie that strengthens the bonds within the community, but it is still misleading. It's not a flat out lie. The data is the data, but it sends a false perception. The reality is that in terms of hardcore gamers, people like me, women, are a minority. And, the only kind of feminist writing you get about these minority situations comes from people like Camille Paglia and things like that. People you don't hear quoted terribly often in gaming discussions because she's not part of the dork side. A minority should not be infringing on the rights of the majority, nor should the majority be infringing on the rights of the minority. I mean, this seems like such a simple concept, but in practice, it's so hard to do. But in gaming, we have a unique ability to create products where people have the experience that they want. Now, the problem is, you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who doesn't play games, who has that opinion of video games. So many people have this idea that games are actively out to get women, and, that, you're going to be confronted with all this horrible stuff that makes you feel so dehumanized. Why would anybody want to do that? And I'd understand that if that's what the experience of playing video games really was, but it's not. Just like movies or television shows, if something is not to your taste, you don't have to play it. Now, some of these franchises get so huge. There's fewer and fewer of them now that are like this. I remember when, Halo was at its peak, you couldn't get away from that game. People were taking days off work to play that game. And, if you wanted to socialize at all, Halo was on the TV. Someone would come over and everybody would play. And if you didn't like Halo, well, you couldn't play because nobody wanted to play anything else. And it's not so much that way anymore. There's very few games that are that dominant. Games like Destiny are big and things like that, but that's fine. They have their community. That doesn't stop me from playing, my little indie game that I like about robots phoning home. Have I mentioned how much I like that game? It's so cute. Some of the puzzles are really frustrating, but the game is so cute. But it's just really got me thinking that we are coming at a lot of issues, not we listening to this channel, but collectively, the solutions you hear bandied about the games industry are definitely attempting solutions through tyranny of the majority. And those just aren't going to work, because gaming doesn't really have a clear majority when it comes to interest. We're breaking our demographics down in gaming in ways that I feel are completely artificial. You know, a guy, you know, a non-white straight guy can like the exact same games that a white lesbian woman can like, and even make a lot of the same choices in the game. And I think in terms of meaningful choice, those choices, how they engage with the game, are way more important than the identity politics boxes that they check. And, you know, because games are a form of performance. You can escape your body through a game by taking on an avatar. And this is something that isn't understood enough. It's something that hasn't been studied enough. And it's something that we don't have a vocabulary for, this performative quality of video games. And so you get into this argument of how much power should white men have. Well, at the end of the day, like, really, developers shouldn't be thinking in those terms. They should be thinking, what does my RPG audience want? Or what does my action shooter audience want? And that shouldn't matter, other than, you know, open-ended design choice in general. It shouldn't matter whether that audience is male, female, black, white, gay, straight, or anything in between. You know, trans, cis, undecided. It shouldn't matter, because it's all about how they want to play the game. You know, it's that existential question of, if a straight woman plays as a gay man in game, which state matters for the purpose of choice? It's complicated, isn't it? And these are the complications that, to me, seem very beautiful. This is why I'm fascinated by games. This is why I love video games. This is why, you know, I spend every day now of my professional life talking about video games in really complex, deep ways. And let me tell you, I like doing this way better than, you know, music or any of the other subjects I've worked with in media. There's something amazing about video games. Enthusiast gamers are accused of inflicting the tyranny of the majority on, you know, supposed newcomers to games, and screw the establishment for that, because I am not a newcomer to video games. I've been playing games all my life, and I don't like the fact that it's assumed that I'm just some noob because I'm female. We're accused of keeping new people out. But at the same time, enthusiasts are now a minority. And we're being told our viewpoint doesn't matter. And we're being told, you know, thanks for building this community, but now, you know, let the cool kids take over. We know better than you where to go from this. And the truth is, we're only starting to really understand. And then you get into the idea that, you know, a male typical response in terms of preferences is not the response of every male. And you see some of these studies, it's like 63% of men did this, therefore, you know, the male typical response is, well, that's a huge minority of guys who didn't make that choice. So how typical can we really claim that choice is? I think to brand an entire large group like that, it has to be like 80% or higher. And even then, when 1 in every 5 dudes doesn't make that choice, you can't make the assumption that a guy is going to make that choice. You know, that's playing Russian roulette with your assumptions with a 6-shooter. So this is the issue with these ideas of oh, what's typical or what men want or what women want or what's a gamer or all that stuff. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, because in order to sort of calm things down and get past the stupid pissing matches that we get stuck in for the last, God, since like 2012, we have to stop this garbage in, garbage out approach. And I'll wrap there. Like I said, I wasn't going anywhere linear with this. It's just food for thought. So we'll close out now because Momo's chill and fluffy, and that's a good place to be. Breathe in. And out. And breathe in.